Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, wherever you might be in this fine world. You're listening to the Startup Selling Show, talking sales with Scott Sabucci. That's me. Today's episode is a guest episode, and today's guest is Amy Volas. Amy is, she's just one of those people that you want to make sure you listen to this episode. Over on her LinkedIn profile, she likes to tell people that she helps startups hire sales leaders without the cringe. She's a founder CEO, a two-time entrepreneur, and she's personally closed over $100 million in revenue. And she's one of LinkedIn's top sales voices. In addition to her role as founder and CEO at Avenue Talent Partners, Amy is one of those people that just gives and gives and gives because she cares and cares and cares about the sales profession. She is a co-founder of Thursday Night Sales, which she started back in March of 2020 at the beginning of lockdown of the global pandemic as a way to give the virtual sales world a way to communicate and have some community. And she's continued through the pandemic on continuing to host Thursday Night Sales. She's also an entrepreneur in residence at Venture Scale. She's a founding member at Sales Hacker. She's an MVP member of Modern Sales Pros. If you have been involved with the startup and selling scene over the last 10 years, you recognize each and every one of those different events, groups, ventures that she's been involved with, not to mention her work as the founder CEO of Avenue Talent Partner. Amy has a unique gift of communicating clearly and crisply to people. She's a straight shooter because, as she likes to say, she just doesn't have time for people that she doesn't want to work with. So I'm really excited to have her on the show. She's a guest that I've been wanting to have, and I had some scheduling mistakes on my end that prevented us from doing this much sooner. So she graciously was able to reschedule, make this happen, and shared her wisdom with us today. I'm not going to share too much about the conversation other than let you know that we focused 100% on why it's so difficult and why it's so important to hire the right sales talent in your growing B2B tech startup. I'm really excited that we had her on the show. As you can tell, as I've already shared, she's very people-centric. She's very process-driven. And her experience as an enterprise sales person and also in HR tech really gives her a broad perspective on what people just like you, founders, CEOs of B2B tech companies, what you're going through every day. And it's a perspective that many other recruiters out there do not have. So all parts equal, she's part recruiter, part sales consultant, part therapist, and part coach. So make sure you check out Amy and her company at avenuetalentpartners.com. You can also find her over on LinkedIn at Amy Volas is her handle over there. Send her a note. Make sure you link up with her at a minimum. Make sure you follow her so you can see all the great content that she's pumping out each and every day with her and her team. Check out Thursday Night Sales if you haven't already checked it out. She's also active on Clubhouse, which we talked about before, or we talked about ahead in our sales conversation and our podcast conversation. And other than that, I'm going to get out of the way and let you listen to this next conversation that I'm about to have with Amy Volas. All right, enjoy. So I wanted to dive right in because I got a lot of questions and I've already done an intro. So people have gotten to this part of the podcast have already decided that they definitely want to tune in because of the conversation we're about to have. And I wanted to ask you, like, why in the very beginning, going back to the beginning in some ways, why recruiting? Because you've got a hell of a sales history. You've closed over $100 million of deals, and it seems like you could probably make a lot of money being a salesperson, a sales leader, probably even, I know now you run your own company, but why this industry of recruiting? Why have you decided to make this your life's work?
Yeah, so I don't really identify with the recruiting side, as funny as that is. So I feel like I'm still very much in sales. I'm just supporting it from a very different perspective. So if you do research on me, or for anybody that's here, if you go to my website, you'll find on the Avenue Talent Partners website, front and center, it says taking the cringe out of recruiting. And that's why. So my entire sales career was spent selling products and services to the HR tech recruiting talent acquisition community. And as I was coming up and as I was a sales leader and as I was part of the startup world, which is my second business love. So sales is number one, startups would be number two. I noticed that especially for companies that I worked with that were on the high growth trajectory, everyone focused on growth, but there's a difference between profitable growth and growth at any cost. And I noticed a correlation between growth at any cost and a whole lot of churn on the sales floor. And then I think about all the conversations that I had with my buyers. So, I think even to back it up further from that, which I'll finish that thought in a second, but to back it up further than that, Scott, every single conversation I had with the products and services that I sold was, I don't have a problem talking to people, finding people. I have a big problem finding the right people for the work that we need to be done. And this had a lot to do with sales and then everything around it too. It's like recruiting in general. And I have a really hard time keeping those people. And as the digital age has continued to innovate and progress, it's gotten even harder. And you would think like, oh, there are sites like Indeed and Glassdoor and ZipRecruiter and Google and LinkedIn and all of the things. It should be really easy, but yet it's even harder. And that has always been fascinating to me. Like, why is it so hard? What about it makes it so hard? And I realized what it was when I was in sales working for somebody else. So this is my second venture, and it became very clear to me that in order to create the change that you want to see, it's very hard to do that for other people. And it's a lot easier when you do it for yourself, especially if you're really trying to shake things up, which is what I'm trying to do. So that's like kind of the genesis of the problems that I've always cared about solving. And I won't do anything if I don't believe in it. I'm not going to waste my time on vaporware or on fluff or on ridiculous things that don't deliver. And if I've ever been part of that, I won't stick around for very long. And so, because nobody likes bait and switch, right? Me included. And that has certainly happened in my career. But long story long, I think for what I'm doing and why I'm doing it in the last 5.5 years that I've been doing it has been because I care deeply about the sales ecosystem. I care deeply about startups. I'm turned way on by the dynamics of a startup. However, not nobody, many struggle with, even sales leaders struggle with hiring right for a variety of different reasons. And I know I would say the lion's share of those reasons, but then I also know how to fix it. And that's the thing. So when I stumbled upon that, and I still get hit up by recruiters, internal and external, I'm like, do you not read what I do? Crazy. It's like, what? It is cringeworthy.
I got offered a BDR position the other day, so
I mean, I would hire
there's
you.
anything wrong with that. I'm just not my
No.
path.
Yeah, well, same. It's just there's a whole lot of clutter, and I think the digital age has only exacerbated that issue. And so how do you cut through the clutter? What do you do if you're a highly technical founder that doesn't speak the language of sales and you need to hire? And you don't want to get it wrong. You genuinely do want to get it right. Or maybe you thought you were getting it right and you didn't, which is a huge part of the work that we do. We do a lot of mishire cleanup.
Mm-hmm.
And so I still get to be in sales. I didn't break up with my roots. And anybody that talks to me would say she leads with that sales heart first than being a recruiting firm owner. And I hear about that from my clients all the time. If I am introduced or if somebody comes my way and they say, hey, we've got this, I just had this call today and they were like, this was refreshing. I said no to them. And they were like, wait, what? And I said, this doesn't make sense. You're B2C. I'm not a B2C gal. And I know my ICP like the back of my hand. And it would be a real shame to tell you what I think you want to hear and get you really excited and to take your job order and then to fall short on the delivery side. And they were like,
Yeah.
thank you so much. So that's a long story long of I don't identify with the recruiting community. In fact, it makes me cringe a little bit. I do identify with making my community better, which is sales and startups, through the way that I can create that change, which it always starts with the people. And if I can help fix that, I'm helping those businesses in a much more significant way than I would if I were just in sales for my own little slice of the pie. And I'm self employed. So I'm trying to show people quality over quantity all day long. We only work with a handful of clients at a time. I'm not the cheapest solution in town. And I show people you can still be really, really successful without cutting corners and without being a dirtbag and do good business. And so that's my whole jam.
Well, I know. I mean, I know from following you on LinkedIn and seeing your stuff. I mean, you're modern sales pro, founding member of Sales Hacker. entrepreneur in residence at Venture Scale, co-founder of Thursday Night Sales. So I oftentimes wonder, like, how do you have time to do your job with all of the other ways that you're contributing to the entire sales community? And I just really appreciate that. And Frank would love to learn how you make the time to do it. I'd love to talk about a couple, like you use the word noise, you use the word clutter a couple of times. And so there's a couple of different directions we might go with this. But maybe just start with maybe the basic question, which is, if when you think about that growth stage startup, the B2B startup that does match your ICP, what are the 2 or 3 key mistakes that every founder or many founders tend to make that end up being your cleanup projects?
So I think that they think all referrals are created equal. So a lot of what is the catalyst for getting us involved comes from we've got funding, so now we need to grow, so now we need to hire. And oftentimes there's a board and there is the VC side of things, and people have connections, and it's like, you should talk to this person. And there's this misunderstanding that they're well vetted or that they're perfect because this is coming from the paper trail that advises you and or gives you money. And chances are it's somebody that they've heard of and they're just making a connection and they're not very well vetted, or it's like a friend of a friend that is in sales and hey. So there's that. And I think that guilt of saying no and feeling weird about that. I think it's also the misconception of I've got funding and I need to grow, so now I need to build out an entire team. Where if we're talking about enterprise, that may not necessarily be the case, and you need to crawl before you even think about walking, before you ever even run. That's another part of it. The other piece, and the biggest piece, is the misconception that all salespeople are created equal.
Yeah.
And just because I see on LinkedIn or on an introduction or on some sort of social platform, somebody's talking about how they went to President's Club and how successful they are and the things that they've done. Well, how they did it, why they were doing it, where they were doing it, the kind of company that they were doing it at, the work that was required to be successful. You've been in sales, so have I. I've seen people walk into books that didn't have to create anything. They're not going to be an early stage seller if they've never done that before, if they don't understand the work. The way that you're enabled stepping in or having all sorts of infrastructure around you is quite different than when I went from Yahoo, where I had all the bells and whistles and brand recognition, to being employee number 20 something at Indeed, building on an enterprise sales function from scratch with zero marketing behind it. The only money that they spent was on SEO and SEM, and we were giving it away for free. And so it was like this huge uphill battle with the cards stacked against us. And it required a lot of different work, a lot of creative work, a lot more of blood, sweat, and tears to even get the door to open than it did at Yahoo. So I'm up for that. That's my jam. I love a good build, but not everybody is. And I think it's that misconception.
I love that list. So referral being 1, growing too fast 2, and 3rd being all salespeople being considered equal. So maybe just to give somebody some tactical tips, like, because this comes up all the time, which is, hey, I think you should talk to this person. I think she'd be really great, or this guy would be really good for you, or you should at least go talk to him. How do you say no in that? Do you have a way of saying no politely in a way that doesn't hurt the, potentially impactful relationship? Because that investor that's, investing in this round might be the lead in the next round, or that advisor who's helping you today could also give you an introduction to Wells Fargo. So you don't want to hurt those feelings or hurt that ego. So is there a specific way that you'd recommend that somebody can handle that referral, maybe from the beginning, to make sure the expectations are clear?
Absolutely. I have a mantra that saying no is just as powerful as saying yes. It's how you say it, which is what you're asking, right? So it doesn't have to be a disaster. It doesn't have to be getting the door slammed in your face. So there's a couple things. I think for anybody that's listening to this, before you even start thinking about hiring, even if the pressure is on, I would stop and I would get real intentional about what is the work that actually needs to be
Mm,
done. I'm a huge fan of founder led selling, so that you have your finger on the pulse of your buyer journey, what your buyer wants, why they want it, how long it took, what was involved, any potential security reviews, compliance. When it comes to customizations, what if you're going after the government segment and there's a lot built around that requires, what if they get audited? They have all sorts of things that they think about that the private sector doesn't think about. It just depends. There's lots of different layers. So I think to take a pause and to think about the buyer journey, to think about the work, to think about your involvement because you did do founder led selling. And if you didn't do founder led selling, don't hire a darn person. Get out there and spend time with your buyers. It is that priceless knowledge that gives you wisdom, perspective, and power around being able to say no. So let's flash forward to the use case that you're talking about. So now I've spent time with an intentional, thoughtful approach to my hiring profile. And the reason why I've done that is now I can back that up with tangible, real, no fluff insight of this is why these top 5 things matter. This is why it's table stakes. This is my must have. This is my nice to have. Great. So now I've got this. I've taken that time. I've got it. So now when the intros start coming through, you can say, if you're asking for help, I was really intentional about putting this profile together. I can't deviate away from this. Any help that you might have would be so greatly appreciated. But if we could stay within these guardrails, I don't want to waste your time, don't want to waste their time, certainly don't want to waste mine. And people are going to be like, wait, you came prepared and made it easy for me to help you. Thank you.
Well,
So that's one way. The other way is, let's say you didn't do that. I just did this yesterday. We're onboarding a client. He's getting intros every single day from his board, from his VCs, from people that he knows, because he talked about this and he said, I have a recruiting partner. We are just going through our kickoff and discovery process, and it's really rigorous. And so yesterday he brings somebody and I'm dying. I'm like, oh my gosh, like, no way. This person is, so I get the snippet of the email. There's no profile there, but I put it together. I find him on LinkedIn, but it's like, I want to be a CEO, a CRO, a CSO, a CIO. I'm like, I want to be a lot of things too, but like, pick one thing. What's the one thing that you do well? So that screams to me, I don't know what you do well, and I don't think you do either. So that's step one. But step two is I look at his profile. He's never been a VP of sales. This is a seed stage company that's going for their A round. They have like 2 million in ARR. That's it. A CEO, CRO, CIO, no. And so I used it as an opportunity to say, is this the right person? Right. So this is, I pulled out the LinkedIn profile and said, is this the right person? I just went off of the name here. But when I look at the description from the email of what he wants to do, and then if this is who he is, what he's been doing, full disclosure, it would never be somebody that we would go after. And we're not through kickoff, but the things that you shared with me, X, Y, and Z, and I pulled the top 3 out. I don't see it here. And the last thing that I want to do is put you out of integrity with people that are making introductions. How do we handle this to say no? Because I want to be efficient. And he was like, totally good. All I needed to do was to say that I lobbed it over and we're cool. Don't spend time there. See how that was much more collaborative of, I took my time to understand and I built a case around why it might not work. And I brought it back in a thoughtful way versus www.nowayinhell.com. Very different, right? Very different use cases there.
All right, folks, we are off and running in my conversation with Amy Volas, founder CEO at Avenue Talent Partners. As you can probably start to tell, Amy's a straight shooter. She'll tell you the way it is because she knows that's the best way to get to the truth. And one of the things we do here is we have to be straight shooters with our clients. And one of our jobs is to make sure that whenever there's a founder or CEO that's working on their sales process, they're trying to grow their company, it's our job to make sure that we're super clear with them about what we feel like they need to do next in order to grow and scale and make the impact that they want to make with their startup. So, we do that every day with our clients. And we also offer that opportunity to get some straight talk, to get an outside perspective, to get a view on your sales process through what we call our situation session. So a situation session is a really simple process. You go book in a situation session with us. We take a 15-minute call and we do a friendly, call it interrogation about your sales process. And what we'll do in those 15 minutes is through some rapid fire questions, help you get really clear about specifically where you need to focus most around your prospecting and lead gen, around your pipeline and your active deals, as well as your pricing and your customer success. So if you want to get an outside perspective, you want to get a clear view, a third-party point of view on what you need to do in order to help your startup to grow up, then I absolutely recommend taking advantage of this situation session. It's completely free. We do these pro bono, so we want to help people out. And frankly, selfishly, we know that some people that sign up for this situation session might want some help solving the problems that we help them uncover. And that's okay for both of us too. So if you want to get book in a situation session, the easiest thing for you to do is go over to salesqualia.com. And even if you've already downloaded a copy of Stop Hustling, Start Scaling, just go ahead and click the link that's on the homepage, salesqualia.com, to download a copy of the book. Type in your email address, and then the follow-up page will then present you with a page where you can book in a situation session directly from my Calendly calendar. So go ahead and take advantage of that. We'll be straight shooters. We'll tell you what's up, what you need to do, where you've got some gaps, and that way we can get you on your way to ramping up, scaling up, and making the impact that you want to make with your startup. Okay, that's it for now. Let's head back to my conversation with Amy Volas. Well, I like this idea. Like I was just sketching out, imagining almost kind of activity inventory. Like if I'm a founder-led, selling, or maybe I'm a founder-led salesperson, but also I have some BDRs and AEs, and it's time to bring in a head of sales or VP. This idea of just tracking all of the requirements, because it feels like to me now what I've done is I've been able to objectively scorecard for the person that's doing the referral. I'm like you said, like, cool, this is the scorecard we're using for all candidates, whether it's somebody who comes in totally cold, somebody we go out and recruit and work with somebody like Amy to find that client, or a referral. Everybody's going to run through the same rubric, and either they pass or they don't. We don't move forward. If they do pass, then they earn the right to interview, and that's it. And I think there's a lot of, it helps, I think, remove the emotional component, because then it's not like me making the decision. It's like, well, the rubric says that this person's not a good candidate, so sorry. And to your point, at the end of the day, let's just get clear on what the incentive is on the other side, because maybe it just is like, hey, I told this person I'd send their name out in a couple of places. It's not a fit. It's not a fit. Let's just not assume just because the investor sent somebody my way that I should feel pressure to go even spend 5 minutes with this candidate. Let's just get clear on what the expectations are from the beginning.
Well, it doesn't mean that your investor knows. Your investor cares about their investment. They may not be a sales practitioner, and that's okay. The flip side is you're speaking my love language about a scorecard. We create a hiring scorecard for every single one of our clients. We haven't done that yet. We just did part one of a rigorous kickoff and discovery process. So I love what you said if that scorecard is in place. But if you're in my world where you're just getting started, now whomever's listening to this, you have two different ways of handling that as you're going through the scorecard creation. So you've got I'm a big fan of setting expectations early and often. And I think it's just about the tonality of how we deliver the message, where it's like, look, this is really great. I really appreciate it. And I don't want to stop people from wanting to help you, but this is why I'm not sure it makes sense. How do you feel about that? And people are like, oh, yeah, totally. Thanks for being thoughtful about that. Let's move on. Or I need you to do a solid, at the very least, have a conversation because it's actually the investor's son. Got it. Okay, we will totally handle that with the kid gloves. And chances are the answer is going to be no. Are you okay with that? Let's talk about how we might say no. Right. So I'm foreshadowing what I already know the outcome is going to be 90%, because I can tell this person isn't a sales leader. So I'm going to have to say no. I need to be sensitive to that. I want you to understand what we're going to do. And are you okay with that? We're lockstep in the communication, versus I think a lot of what happens is people assume and then they clean it up later when the assumption went wrong. You have a book on your shelf. I just saw that, The Transparency Sale.
Yeah.
Huge fan of that, right?
Yeah, Todd's great.
It carries over to here as well. Like, cards face up on the table. These are the things, these are the factors. This is what I heard is important to you. If I've missed something, certainly let me know. But here's why. Can we agree to that? And the answer usually is yes.
Yeah, I love that. So the second mistake you mentioned was about finding and growing the team too soon. Does that mean hiring a sales leader too soon, or hiring salespeople? Like, what is that? What does that zero in on? Is it hiring too high too soon? I've seen situations where people hire, and give somebody the VP title or even a CRO title, when in fact that person really should just be a player coach. So, like, how does somebody know when it's time to build the team and when it's time to slow down, given the pressure of just got funding, got to grow fast, don't want to miss out on opportunities. We have 18 months to run away before the next round. So
Yeah,
how do you strike that balance?
I think it's all of the above. You mentioned all the use cases that I see. So I think that's a great summation. But how do you know? So you've already answered the first part, but I think the second part of how do you know, I think you have to pay attention to your business, right? So just because I worked with a founder recently, they've got money behind them with a VC that I'm really close with. And that VC is about growth, right? But not at any cost. And so there is pressure that they feel, but he's like, I want to do this the right way. So I'm looking for like those signals of where I get engaged. But regardless of that, I try to explain to people through data, and I've got a lot of data around if you hire a whole team of people and you don't know exactly what it is that you need or why you need it, that screams that they don't have any insight as to what's happening on the buyer side. And I will explain why that's a good thing to do before we get engaged. And if they're like, hey, I just want butts and seats, quite honestly, Scott, I'll turn that business down. I'm not the right person. And there
Yeah.
are plenty of other recruiters that do make me cringe that'll hump your leg to get the business. Call them. So, there's that. But on my side of things, because I am trying to avoid mishires, and for anybody listening, whether it's an individual contributor, it's a leader, you're talking about a 6 and 7 figure problem that continues to haunt you.
Tell
And
me
I
more
don't,
about that.
so let me finish this and then we'll go
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
that.
Sorry.
I want to
Yeah.
make sure that I'm being succinct because I could go ADD on this thing with you all day long where we could go all over the place and people listening, they're like, well, wait, you never answered the last question.
Sorry.
So we'll
I
talk
should have
about
interrupted. Keep going.
no, the mishire thing is really important. We'll talk about that in a second. But for this, to finish it off, how do you know when? I think when it becomes bigger than you as a founder because you've been founder led selling and you're feeling that pressure and things are starting to stretch or slip through the cracks. But you can absolutely say, I know what the work is that needs to be done. And you're not making assumptions and you're not stealing somebody from your competitor's job description off of the internet and being like, great, it's an AE. That's cool. Let's go get after it. I also don't love let's hire in cohorts and the cream will rise to the top. That's not fair and it's detrimental to your business, which we'll get into what you and I are talking about for mishires. But the signals are different. It depends on the stage. It depends on the expectation of growth. It depends on a lot of different factors. But for me, it's if it is time to go, make sure you understand the what and the how, and then go out and get it. And I always like to start conservative because chances are, especially in the enterprise, when people are like, we're going to hire 10 enterprise sellers. No, you're not. You sure aren't. You're going to flood the market too much. That's going to be too much for you. How about you start out with 3 max? One for the East, one for the West, one for the Central, and see how that goes and then build it out from there. Or maybe start with 2, East, West. Maybe start with 1. Having any help after you've been selling as a founder directly is going to teach you a whole lot, especially when you're hiring somebody that's just their full-time job. On the flip side, for leadership, do not hire a sales leader when you don't need one, right? So many founders I talk to, they're like, I don't want to deal with this. I just want to hire somebody that owns revenue. And it's like, well, no, no, no. Do you realize what that means? Like a CRO owns a lot of things, and a CRO is a leader of leaders when you're talking about the true term of a CRO. So if somebody is telling you to get me, I have to be your CRO, that's not the right person for you. It's, if anything, it's typically a head of sales when it's an earlier stage. And if they've been a VP before, great, they'll be a VP. Anything more than that is way too heavy. And really, I find that the VP comes into play when there's about 3 people. Then then you have a rhythm, you have sales, you probably have some sort of process, but it's messy, starting to feel a lot messier, and you need structure and rigor around that to be able to scale it. Great time to think about a leader. Did that answer
So
it?
you mentioned, yeah, it did. And so you mentioned about timing. It's a place where, as a founder, you're noticing things slip through the cracks. What would be a couple of examples of something that would indicate like that what's slipping through the cracks? What's something really practical that I could diagnose myself and say, oh, these things are happening. That's a signal that Amy said I should think really hard about hiring now.
You keep pushing off follow-up. You don't
Uh,
have time for to do your own demos. You have a laundry list of items and you keep pushing the sales items to the bottom of the list, right?
Mm.
So you've got business, you've got clients, you're involved in that, but you're stretched. And these things start to slip. You can't have that happen. That's really dangerous. Like, that's the number one thing that I tell people to look for. So I'm a big fan of journaling, and I have a whole system of how to do this. And so for anybody listening, you can either check it out on my blog or you can ask me and I'll happily share it with you. But I look at quadrants. And as an entrepreneur and business owner and leader in my own business, and I do have, so to answer a little teaser for you, Scott, I have a team of people. That's how I can do all the things that I do. So delegation for the win. But I'm still involved. I'm still way involved in my business. That said, I make a list every day. And one of the things, so I have 4 things and then I have a fifth. And the fifth is, what am I leaving behind? And I look at my journal in 3-week chunks. So I'll do my journal exercise and then I'll look back every 3 weeks with a highlighter and I look for the themes. And when I start seeing themes of things that I purposely leave behind because it sucks or I don't have time, but it's really important, that then starts creating a job description of somebody that I need to hire, or giving somebody on my team additional responsibility, or asking for help in a different way. So that's a really good way to listen to ourselves when we don't always listen to ourselves. You just can, if you're journaling, look back. You can never do that at least for 3 weeks so that you can see some trends and you're not telling yourself a different story because you don't want to hear what you're saying to yourself.
Yeah.
So if that's at all helpful, that's what I start to pay attention to.
Yeah, it's really helpful because I've thought about it, like as you were describing this idea of what's getting left off, just thinking about my own business over the years. And the following up is a big one where you've got like somebody who's interested. You had a great demo and everything's going well. And they're like, great, we want to do these 3 things next. And you're like, yeah, that sounds great. But then you have to jump to the next call and it's a product sprint meeting. And then you have to go interview the engineering hire. And then the next day it's an investor meeting. And now it's Thursday and you had that important great call on Monday and you're like, crap, it's now been 3 days. Like I'm losing the momentum. That thing's
Yeah.
getting pushed off. And it's not intentional. It's not like
No.
I don't want to do it. It's just that every other priority in front of you is a now thing too. And I also was thinking again, based on my own experience, thinking on the front end of the sale, because it's like, okay, we have this demo booked. We finally got the meeting with this prospect that we met. And I know I should be doing a couple of things moving into that meeting. I should be doing a couple of discovery calls. I should be sending a few emails out. I should be confirming a few things. And all of a sudden, it's a day before the demo. And I realized, crap, I didn't do all the stuff I should be doing. And now I show up and I just hope to God that my founder magic is going to like be the magic juju that pulls this thing through. And a third example is just like something as simple as prospecting. Like I remember time in my business every morning, do my 20, get some coffee, hop on LinkedIn, have some fun, get some chats going. And then there was just like weeks on end where I was like not doing any of it. And I realized it's not that it's not important. I just didn't have the time because other stuff took precedence. So I love this idea of identifying the stuff that's not getting done, not because you don't want to do it, which is different, very different. Like I don't want to do sales is different than I just don't have the time to do what I know I should be doing.
And there is such a difference. And I mean, go even to the very front end of the process. What happens if you have a drift chat feature, right? Or any sort of chat feature on your website and you don't have time to respond and it's a hot lead, right? I mean, all these stats that talk about if it takes you, the longer it takes you to respond, the less likely you are to meaningfully engage to get that business. And so it's all of the things. And I think if we start getting in the way of our buyer journeys, then we are the problem and we are also the solution. And so it's different to have 1 week of this because you're in the middle of a sprint than having it be 1/4 of this. So everybody has busy days, everybody has busy weeks. If it starts being more the norm than the exception, that's a really great gut check to think about, to say, yeah, so this is starting to become bigger than I am, especially if you are the logjam of they're asking you for something, you've committed to it, and you can't get that to them, i.e., a referral. They want to talk to somebody else that has done business with you, or a proposal, or you're like, hey, yeah, you know what? We can map out how we can do customization. And then it's 3 weeks later, and your competitor swooped in and took the business from you. And they're like, I liked our conversation. You just left me high and dry and I'm paying attention to how you'd act. And if that's how you're acting, then that's how you'll be after the fact. And I'm not interested in that. So these
Mhm.
are all things to think about and you don't want to mess with.
Yeah, this is really helpful because I know people listening are probably like, "Oh, that's me right now."
Yeah.
So we get to this third mistake, which is all salespeople are equal. What are some specific ways that you think through evaluating candidates? Because I mean, I had this conversation this morning with one of the founders in our coaching program, and he's got some later stage candidates that he's interviewing, and his question was like, "How do I assess them in a way to know if they're good or not to be a head of sales or a VP of sales?" Like engineers, it's like here's the whiteboard, solve the problem. It's easier to evaluate engineers, especially if you've been an engineer or a product person. How do you assess and start to really get clear on whether or not the salesperson you're talking with or the sales leader is in fact a good fit?
Well, I have to
How
do
do
a
you go
shameless
about it?
plug. If you really can't do it, then you call me and I help. But
Well, that's what I'm saying. Like, how would you do it?
well, I mean, I'll give you some of it. A girl can't tell you all the things. Come on, it's why you hire me. But no, I'm kidding. How do you do it? You get as
There's a little joke in every joke, but the rest is truth. And you're right. People should hire you. They should at least
oh,
have a conversation with you to see if they're a good fit for you. So, not asking you to divulge all of your secret sauce, but
no,
I'm
no,
sure.
I'm just also a total smartass. So there's that, right?
Well,
But
I wrote down in my notes that there's people that will hump your leg to get the business. It's like, that is a that is the best quote I've gotten on this podcast in the last like 9 months.
well,
Uh,
I'm just going to drop my mic and get right on out of here then. No, all fun aside, there's absolute truth in that, right? So it's like if I ever needed to hire an engineer for my company, there's no way in hell I'm trying to attempt that. I don't speak the language. I don't know what to look for. I'm going to get bamboozled. Same thing happens in sales. So if you really don't have confidence and you also don't have time, so remember the whole thing that we talked about around time. I can't tell you, I talked to one of my clients, he's hiring an analyst, has nothing to do with what we do. He's like, I put it out on LinkedIn. This is a founder that's raising, that just hired a SVP of sales from us, that also has all of the other bits and pieces of his business every single day. His wife has COVID, she's pregnant, and they've got 3 kids and they're building a house. Dude has a lot on his plate, right? So he's telling me, he's like, yeah, so my downtime, I'm like, when that is, you're my hero. But in my downtime, I put this job out on LinkedIn and I said, and how did that work for you? He's like, I got over 1,000 responses. So now you're worried about candidate experience, employer brand. We're living out loud. People talk. If you're not responsive or you treat them poorly, even if they don't serve you well, you're in trouble, right? I mean, the walls that we once could hide behind, they're crumbling thanks to the digital age. So these are all things that people don't think about until it's too late. I try to help people get out of their own way. So that said, do you have time? And if you don't, and you don't know what you're doing, you do need to get help from somebody like me. Shameless plug all day, every day. I'm proud and I'm good at what I do. That said, let's say you just are like, okay, it's the conversation you had. How do I really know? The one thing that I encourage everybody to think about is go back to the work that needs to be done for your stage. Forget about all the content out there that's like, if you're an A round company, this is what you do, and look for this in a playbook. No, no. Your buyer, your marketplace, your business is unique to you. What is the work that it takes to be successful? And what I would say to your person that you were talking to about this head of sales hire is so many leaders will go through and it's like the car wash of leadership. Like, here's my playbook, here's my 30, 60, 90, and it's read, rinse, and repeat and plug and play. I don't care about that. What I care about is, did you listen to me when we were interviewing, when we were spending time together about the problems that I have in my business, about why we need to hire, about the work that really needs to be done? So remember, intentionality, that's the anchor. So I can have an open and collaborative discussion like this. Forget about the tell me about a time when you were walking down a sandy beach and something scared you and how you got through it and you didn't die that day. Well, that's great to like think about behavioral stuff, but at the end of the day, I need to understand out of theory in practice, can you do the work? And so that is my entire process. That is what it's designed to do. And the best way that you can do that is get out of the theory and get into the practice. So, do you remember when The Real World came out on MTV? I do. I
oh
was a
yeah,
junior in high school.
yeah. I was about the same.
It rocked my world. I was like, what is this? This is amazing. And that New York crew of people, I'll never forget the tagline, when they stop being polite and they start getting real. I want that. Still polite, right? But I want that in the interview process. Let's get to the reality of the situation. And I want to look for signals. Have you done this work before? And if this changes, let's talk about how you adapt. I want to look for the show, not just the tell.
Hmm.
And so if somebody's bringing me a plan, if somebody's bringing me a presentation, I want to understand, why did you put this together? What were you thinking about as you put it together? Like for these first 30 days, everyone's going to say, I need to understand. But what specifically do you think you need to understand here that we talked about? I want to know that they're showing up to understand. You can't teach people to care, and you can't teach them to be curious. You either are or you aren't. And that is half the thing here when it comes to sales hiring is everyone can come and do a great tap dance, but when it comes time for showtime, somehow things fall short. And now we have an issue of 14 to 18 months turnover rates for sales leaders. So knowing that, according to Jason Lemkin, and I absolutely agree with him, there are 48 different kinds of VPs of sales for startups. And the rest of that tagline is, you better make deadly sure you get it right. Totally agree with that. The work is different at a late seed stage company than a C round company, than a Fortune 500 brand. And so what I want to know is, if I'm an A round company, I'm still very much in the build, unless I've been a bootstrapped company for 10 years and I just took A money and we've got it all figured out. The reason why I'm saying that is, see how it's different. You can't just make the assumption that all A round companies are super early and they have nothing figured out. It's different. So, my different and what I need and the work and me mapping all of that out and using a hiring scorecard and having that rubric, and then using that to be armed and dangerous when I'm interviewing somebody. So, every person you interview, I'm a big fan of quality over quantity. Look at them. Why did you agree to speak to them? What are some of the things that they're talking about? So many sales leaders have a personal brand. What are they talking about? How are they thinking through things? Do they have podcasts like this where you can hear their philosophy on things? Lots of people say lots of things, and then you start talking to them in real life and it's very different. Isn't that a gift that you can use that to have an open discussion to confirm or deny? And so, enough of like the interview nonsense and get back to having real conversations that can peel back the layers together, realizing it's a two-way street and it's a mutual decision to come together to do this together or not. And by the way, don't get caught up on who you think you're going to be in 10 years from now because you're the next unicorn. What's the work that you need to do right now for the
And,
next milestone?
and yeah, I was going to ask, how long is that timeline? It's just whatever the next milestone is. It could be 18 months to get to the next round, to go from A to B, 36 months to go from A to C. Is that what you're thinking? Like, that's the work. When you talk about the work, it's the
Yes,
work now in this timeline. Is this person capable of doing this work now?
correct. Versus I am a 4X VP of sales with A and B round startups. That's great. But what if every time that you walked in there, that you came in at the last part of the stage and that work is totally different, and you have rev ops and you have marketing and you have sales enablement and you have all these different things that help you, versus you're the 4X VP of sales that started at the A round and got them through C round, and then it became bigger than you and you realized that, and you had CROs that came in over you. That doesn't mean that you suck. It means that you're really good there, and
Yeah.
that's great. And sometimes you can rise to the occasion and sometimes you can't. I think it's that self-awareness that's missing of, here's what I'm really good at. A dear friend of mine, and he's in the VC world and he's a practitioner and an operator on the VC side. His name is Doug Landis from Emergence Capital. He's written
I
an
know Doug.
Doug is like, I mean, I love Doug. He's just
Yeah.
a good
I know his work.
dude.
I mean, I don't know him personally, but I know him. Yeah.
Everything that you see on the outside, it just gets better on the inside, right? Like, he's as real as it gets, and his insight is not only well earned, he's right. And so what I think is interesting, he wrote an article about the 4 superpowers that sales leaders have, and there isn't a person that has all 4. You're lucky if you get 2. And so thinking about the superpowers, like there's deal management, there's culture management, there's process management, right? Like, so there are these different superpowers. What do you need? Right. And to have that kind of conversation, if somebody's like, I can sell ice to an Eskimo, no, you can't. No, you can't. What is the thing that you do really well? And let's make sure, like, somebody could be like, I love inbound. I need a full demand gen marketing engine to do this. Great. Well, we're outbound. So that's going to be a little bit of a problem, right? Or, hey, we're kicking it old school and we've listened to Amy and we agree full cycle is where it's at. And you want BDRs and inside and out, like, okay, those two things don't add up. And that's
Yeah.
the thing. That is the art and the science of this thing, of why I say they're not all created equal. You've got field sales, you've got channel sales, you've got SMB, you've got mid market, you've got enterprise, you've got inside, you've got outside. I mean, you've got, there's a lot of different variables and so many shades of gray. So when I'm thinking about somebody that, let's say, negotiated a deal at an early stage startup and that poor founder didn't know any better and gave somebody a CRO title and now they just read, rinse, and repeat, you've got somebody that doesn't know any better, like a CRO would, and you're hiring them based on their title and the shiny objects that they put on their profile. Don't get caught up in the shiny objects, which leads back, Scott, to the mishiring piece that we didn't talk about that we need to come back to, because we promised the folks listening to this that we would do that. So I'm going to stop talking because that was a lot.
That was awesome. There's a couple things I wanted to touch on, because as you started talking about this idea of a 30, 60, 90, or this is my sales playbook. And I've heard this from founders, like, oh, I'm going to have this candidate bring in their 30, 60, 90, or show me their playbook. I always feel like a real test of a candidate's mettle is, instead of coming to you with a plan, do they come to you with a list of questions, to your point about, these are the things I would need to know, or these are the things as a company we need to figure out in order for sales to work. It's because that's truly what a salesperson does, is ask questions and figure out what the truth is. So instead of me giving you this polished 30, 60, 90 that's going to go in the garbage can in day 1, hour 3, what if instead you had somebody who was naturally inquisitive and said, like, there's a bunch of stuff that we don't know. It's a bunch of gaps that we have to fill. Once we have these gaps, then we'll be able to figure out what that plan should be.
Yeah.
What do you think about that? Is that?
I love it. I mean, you're speaking my love language now. Here's the thing: get as close to the real world work as possible. And I want to simulate what that looks like. And so part of what we do here is we encourage, not even encourage, my clients don't have a choice. When they work with us, they know that this is going to happen. So it's like eyes wide open, they agree to it. I want you to select 4 real problems that your company's going through that this role would touch. And I want you to talk about those. And even if we have to sign mutual non-disclosure agreements, that's okay. You need to get to the real. And it is so fascinating, Scott, to see how people show up to that conversation. I mean, so many people go to places like Modern Sales Pros, private Slack channels, Revenue Collective, Sales Hacker, different places where I hang out, Thursday night sales. And they're like, I have to do this big presentation. What should I do? What questions should I ask? And you know what I always say? Why are you asking me? It is not my interview to have. I don't know what questions you should ask. You know what questions you should ask? This is a career decision. There's a big difference between making a job move and a career move. And if you're taking your career seriously, you're showing up to understand. And if you're like me, one question leads to another, that leads to another, that leads to another, that leads to another. And so how about you show up for that? How about you make notes and announce that you're making notes? Like, oh, you know what? I'm taking this really seriously. We're on Zoom. You can't tell. If you see me looking over here, I'm just jotting it all down. And then you're having a conversation. And they're saying to you then at the end, so out of all the things that we've talked about, and I love this, Scott, out of all the things that we've talked about, what are the top 3 questions that you really want to drill into to know what resources you need, to know what problems you're going to have, to know how I might support you or not? And they look at you and they're like, I don't have any. We covered it all. Get out of here. Get out of here right now. Like, could you imagine doing that to a buyer? Like, you have no problems. We're good. Just trust me. I've got what I've got the cure for what ails you. All you need to do is just come buy my snake oil and we're good. If people did more of what you and I are talking about, we would see, and I see it in my world, the turnover rates start to diminish.
Love this. I wanted to ask you about hiring in general, because you mentioned about the founder who got 1,000 LinkedIn submissions for their posting. In the world we're living in right now, is it harder or easier to find good candidates? Because part of me feels like if everything is remote and a lot of teams have moved to full remote permanently, I can be based in Silicon Valley and hire somebody in Chicago. Does it make it the matching problem more difficult, or does it make it easier because now I have a bigger pool of people from which I can recruit?
I think logic thinks like, oh, it's the wild, wild west now. It makes it easier, but it's always been hard. It's always going to be hard. Here's why: you have to find the right person.
Mhm.
Doesn't matter where they are, right? And I would argue for those that are like, they have to be at my brick and mortar location. Forget about the pandemic for a second. Is your real like right person within a 20-mile radius to you or a commute distance to your office? The answer is probably no. But what I find fascinating is in first round, they do a bunch of analysis and they come up with their state of startups report. 2020 isn't out yet, but for 2019 and for 2018, and I believe 2017, but don't quote me on 2017. I know for sure 2018 and 2019, the founders, when they said, what's the number one role that's important for you? It was VP of sales. What's the hardest role? Sales. So, here's the thing, it's not easy. It's never going to be easy. And the reason why it's never going to be easy, regardless of geography can help a bit or it can hurt, depending on how you look at it. It's all about that intentionality of knowing what you need and then finding the person. So, everything I do is like heavy duty, sophisticated enterprise outbound ABM. That's my jam.
Mhm.
Just waiting for people to fall into my lap because I put it out on a website and people can keyword match wastes my time. It's kind of like when I tell people don't apply to a job. That's a waste of your time. And you have a less than I forgot the specific number. It's less than 10% chance that anybody's going to get back to you because you fall into the abyss. Same rules over here.
This is awesome. I think it's a good stopping point. Is there anything else that you got sticking in your craw that you want to get out there?
So
That-
we made a commitment to the listeners, Scott, that we talk about
oh yes,
the mishiring.
yes,
That's
yes,
the
yes.
last thing.
Thank you for running the show for me. I'd be lost
Right,
without you.
sir. Step aside. No, I'm kidding. Yeah, so let's talk really quickly. I think this is a great place to leave off because this is why it matters. What a lovely bookend, right? So this is why it matters. When you mishire, the reason why it's a seven-figure problem has a lot to do with these factors. One, the time that it took. So time equals money, and time is one of those currencies that's priceless because once you spend it, you cannot get it back. So the time that it took to hire said VP, I've talked to some founders that they're like, it took me 9 months to find my VP. So, okay, so it took you 9 months. Now, so that's a particular cost. Now you've got, in addition to that, you've got the VP that's there. So the cost to ramp them, they're not fully functional yet. And yes, VPs of sales ramp too. So they're getting up to speed. That's more downtime. Then you've got the time that it didn't really work out. So that's more time. And because they're there and they're leading a team of people, and I'm just talking about it from the VP side, a lot of this overlaps with individual contributors as well. But now you've got how that affects the team, right? How it affects your buyer journey. If you're turning your sales leader is directly correlated to the process for the buyer. And if they're putting something in place that is the antithesis of what your buyer wants, or your team is running in the wrong direction, think about the number of opportunities on the cutting room floor as a result of that. And especially in enterprise, if you irritate an enterprise buyer, you get one shot. And if you mess that up, good luck trying to get that door back open again. So you've got that. Then you've got payroll costs. Then you've got the amount of time it takes to refill the person. You're down then. How many opportunities are falling short, or the process is falling short, or the team is dangling in the wind? Oh, and by the way, if you've negotiated any sort of guaranteed severance or any sort of guarantee on that, or the equity that you've given them. And if they've vested any part of that, you've got that. Oh, and by the way, let's say it didn't work out so well, and now there's some legal stuff happening. You've got those costs. Oh, and by the way, insurance costs you something. Oh, and by the way, if they have an Amex card, what about that? I had a true story of a client. We were cleaning up a mishire. They reconciled said mishire's expense report. Person was out of the country on a business trip, and it had expensed two ladies of the night. You've got that now, right? So you've got and for those of you that don't know what ladies of the night are, you can look that up and figure it out. So
I
there,
think our audience gets it.
and then let's say this is a big thing that happens in leadership hiring. Who are you going to bring with you? Who would come with you? Because that's a really good indicator that you're a good leader, which part of it absolutely is, but it just depends on who the leader is and who the people are that are following. What happens when that happens and then those people leave? And now you've got turnover on the sales team. This, ladies and gentlemen, is why it's a 7-figure problem that's not easy to just clean up and tidy up. And it continues to haunt you for a really long time. So I'm going to leave everybody with that fun little thing to think about that you want to avoid.
I think it's an 8-figure problem after you describe all that.
Well, and imagine when you keep doing it every 14 to 18 months.
Well, the good news is if you do it too many times, you won't have the problem anymore. You'll have bigger problems. You'll be the one applying for a job.
This is true. And the better news is I can help you with it. How about that one? How about more shameless plugging, Scott?
Not shameless. It's appropriate. And so what's the best place for people to go? They're listening to you. They're like, all right, I got to talk to this woman. She's got to help me. What's the best place they can do? What's the first thing they can do, the best thing they can do to get in touch to see if they're a good match for you?
Well, thank you, by the way, for this. I've really enjoyed our conversation. For anyone that is listening, you can find me on LinkedIn. I'm the only Amy Volas there. AvenueTalentPartners.com is my website. I'm on Clubhouse having lots of conversation about these topics and so much more. And then Thursday Night Sales, it's ThursdayNightSales.com. So all of those are the different ways. And I will say this, there is a very fun side to my personality, but make no mistake, this is a really serious topic. And as much as it is hard to hear and as much as I'm direct, I say this with peace and love because I care a whole lot about getting it right. So I hope that came through more than anything else.
Absolutely. I mean, that's why I wanted to have you on the show, and I'm regret we couldn't do it sooner. And I'm glad we made it happen today. And I'm already thinking about what we could do for part 2, if you're up for it.
I'm here for it, Scott. Thank you.
Absolutely.
I really appreciate it. And I hope that this was helpful for anybody that.
Yeah, I learned a ton. Lots of good resources, some good quotes here. Get to the real people that hump your leg for the business, ladies of the night.
Okay, let's not do all that in one fell swoop.
I'm going to make that the title of the podcast. Don't get your leg humped. Get to the real and look out for ladies of the night. An interview with Amy Volas of Avenue Talent Partners.
Oh my gosh, I'm turning red. It's hard to make me blush. If you do that, I will die. But I said the words, so I apparently have to own them.
It's all good.
Thanks. This is great.
This has been a hoot. Thanks so much. Definitely appreciate all that you do for the community with Thursday Night Sales, Modern Sales Pros, the Clubhouse rooms. People should, if they can't find you, it's their fault because you are everywhere, whether it's you or your team helping you out. Absolutely love everything you're pumping out. Thanks for all that you do. And let's do it again soon.
You're welcome. Right back at you. Thank you.
All right, Amy. See ya. Bye.
Bye.
All right. That's a wrap. I think the quote of the episode was, some people will hump your leg to get the business. That was pretty cool. Amy's awesome. Really glad to have had her on the show. If you enjoyed this show and enjoyed other episodes of our podcast here at the Startup Selling Show, Talking Sales with Scott Sambucci, I would really, 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 really appreciate it if you did 1 or 2 things for me. Number 1, tell a friend or 10. Flick them an email, send them a text, take a screenshot, do whatever you can. If you found this podcast through LinkedIn or found it through email or found it through a friend, tell another friend or 10. Tell them about the Startup Selling Show. Tell them that we're throwing out some pretty great content here each and every week, combination of guests as well as recordings from LinkedIn Lives that I've done. Everything we're doing is tactical and practical to help you identify gaps and overcome the challenges that come with ramping up, scaling up, and growing so that you can make an impact in your market. So tell a friend or 10 about the show. Second thing is, if you're listening to this on Apple Podcasts or SoundCloud or any of the other wonderful listening platforms, go ahead and just click the review button there. We'd love for you to leave a review. Tell us what you like. Tell us what we can do to make things even better. Leave us a rating because those ratings not only help us make the show better, but it also helps those platforms suggest our show to people that might be looking for some resources, some know-how, some knowledge on how to ramp up, scale up their startups. So if you do those two things, refer a friend or 10 to the show and leave a review, that would be just spectacular. That's all I ask as payment for all that we're doing here with the show. Okay, that's it for now. I think it's a good place to call today. Thanks so much for listening to the Startup Selling Show, Talking Sales with Scott Sambucci. That's me, and I am signing off.